Hello guys, welcome back. I'm coming to you with another episode about therapy, but in this episode I'm going to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. In the previous episode, I talked in general about what psychodynamic therapy is and the basics of how it interprets human behavior and emotions. And today, I want to continue along the same lines, but in this episode, I'm going to introduce you to a different therapeutic approach, cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. And by the way, I've always wondered, when you're looking for a therapist, how much do you actually pay attention to the approach they use? Well, obviously, you can't comment directly on podcasts unless you're listening on YouTube. But if you had first-hand experience with therapy or you've talked to someone who has, I'd love to know, first of all, do you actually check what your approach, what approach your therapist works in? And second, do you care about those approaches at all? Or is it totally, completely relevant to you? And you just go by recommendations from other clients or word of mouth from friends or that kind of thing. I'd like to know. So last time I told you about a psychodynamic approach, that it is more about slowly uncovering the root of a problem and often going all the way back to early childhood. Because in psychodynamic thinking, that's when our very first bonds are formed, and those play a key role later in life. And because of that, psychodynamic therapy tends to be a long-term process. And cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is, in the simplest terms, much more concrete. It's what's called an evidence-based therapy, meaning it's backed by scientific research showing its effectiveness. Now, I'm not saying that psychodynamic therapy isn't effective, but it hasn't been studied in the same objective, structured way that CBT has. And compared to psychodynamic therapy, CBT is usually much shorter. Well, typically, you're looking at a set number of sessions, maybe a dozen or maybe sometimes 20, during which you identify the cause of the problem and work together to come up with specific strategies and practical steps to help you deal with it. And of course, if the issue is more complex, or if the client struggles with completing the assignments or connecting with their emotions, therapy can be extended maybe to 20-something sessions. Sometimes, very rarely, usually that's the case with personality disorders. The CBT therapy can be extended to, for example, year or year and a half, but this is definitely not going to stretch over several years, like psychodynamic therapy. It also depends on the therapist, but I know CBT practitioners who, if they see progress slowing down or hitting a plateau, they will suggest taking a break from therapy. That way, the client has space to try out the techniques they've learned so far and then come back later with an update on what worked, what didn't, and what still needs attention. And since we're talking about techniques, a huge part of CBT is homework. So be prepared that after a CBT session, you'll probably get an assignment. And these can be very different depending on the issue you're working on. It might be keeping an emotions journal, writing down challenging situation and thoughts that came with them, mapping out how your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are connected, or doing relaxation exercise daily or a few times a week between sessions. There's actually quite a wide range of possible assignments, and they all are tailored to your specific problem. And previously, I talked about how psychodynamic therapy assumes that the roots of most problems lie in early childhood relationships and the dynamics between a child and their caregivers, as well as between the caregivers themselves. In cognitive behavioral therapy, the basic assumption is quite different. The assumption is that people learn. In fact, the process of learning begins essentially at birth. And it's not, or some people might say that even before, even as fetus, we can learn. But let's focus on the time after we are born. So the CBT assumes that learning begins essentially at birth, and it's not just humans. Animals learn in exactly the same way. If you have pets, you've probably noticed that the sound of a can being opened can make your furry friend appear next to you at lightning speed, because they've learned that an opening can means something good is coming. And throughout life, we learn all kinds of patterns. We learn that you say hello when you enter a place. We learn not to put our hand into a fire because it will hurt. But we can also learn maladaptive patterns, behaviors and beliefs that do not really serve us well. And we can learn, for example, that it's not worth telling others about our feelings because they might laugh at us. We might learn that you cannot trust anyone because you'll end up betrayed or taken advantage of. Or we might learn that people judge others based on appearance because someone once said something hurtful to us. But does that mean everyone who's ever heard a mean comment will automatically develop such a belief? Well, of course not. If that were the case, it would mean people operate like machines, stimulus in, reaction out. And that's not how humans work. This is where the cognitive component comes in. The cognitive realm is a fairly complex concept, and I'm not going to unpack all of it here, but for our purposes, the most important thing to understand is this. Learning is not a simple stimulus-response process. It's a complex mental process that happens within a social context. That means we don't just learn by reacting to things. We also learn by observing others, drawing conclusions from those observations, listening to how other people interpret and reason about events, watching the consequences of others' behavior, and even by modeling our own behavior and seeing what happens when we change it. Well, Albert Bandura, one of the founding figures of the cognitive approach, argued that the cognitive dimension of a person, meaning their subjective way of perceiving and interpreting reality, is inseparably connected to both behavior and the external environment. So, as you can already see, or rather hear, getting to the root of a maladaptive behavior or belief can sometimes be quite difficult. And very often it's actually easier for us to identify the emotions we felt in response to an experience that it is to pinpoint the thoughts or underlying beliefs that went along with it. And the beliefs we hold often lead us to what's called automatic thoughts. So for example, let's say we have a core belief that people are dishonest. Now imagine a simple scenario. Someone borrows a pen from us and doesn't give it back. Well, our automatic thought kicks in immediately. They're a thief. And just like that, we're upset. Well, automatic thoughts allow us to interpret the reality very quickly. They don't require much effort, which means we conserve our mental energy and cognitive resources. But the real question is that interpretation actually accurate? Well, in the case of an exam, for instance, maybe that one who borrowed a pen from us, maybe that person was simply nervous and forgot to return the pen. Or maybe they're terrible with faces and genuinely didn't realize it was ours. Or perhaps it was the first time they had ever forgotten their pen and it never even crossed their mind that they had borrowed it. Well, this is a very simple example, but I hope it clearly shows how unhelpful core beliefs and the automatic thoughts that stem from them can make life harder. And they can cover many different areas. They might be beliefs about ourselves. I'm useless, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm unattractive. They might be about other people. They're bad, dishonest, just out to take advantage of me. Or about the world in general. The world is dangerous, threatening, unpredictable, and so on. And our behaviors and emotions will naturally follow those beliefs and thoughts. And I don't want to list them all here. There are as many variations as there are people. But you can probably imagine how a consistently negative view of the world, of ourselves, and of others often leads to avoiding contact with people, giving up on personal growth, and experiencing depression, anxiety, addictions, or many other issues that bring clients to therapy. Well, the main goal of cognitive behavioral therapy is to identify those core beliefs, understand the chain that links them to our emotions and behaviors, and develop techniques that help us change the way we interpret reality. And ultimately, this allows us to control our behavior and emotions so that they no longer have such a negative impact on our lives. So, put simply, in CBT, we work to identify the source of unhelpful maladaptive patterns so we can change them. And in doing so, we eliminate the behaviors and the painful emotions that go along with them that have been holding us back. And in the previous episode on psychodynamic therapy, I talked about how a large part of the therapist's work focuses on monitoring transfers and countertransference and on interpreting the emotions that arise in the therapeutic relationship. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, the relationship between therapist and client is also incredibly important, but for a slightly different reason. In CBT, the client works together with the therapist to define the problem and to develop appropriate solutions. And that's why it's often said that in CBT, the therapist works just as actively as the client because the outcome depends on the joint effort of both sides. And what's more, CBT is much more focused on specific concrete problems and therefore on what's happening here and now rather than primarily on the past. And of course, past experiences are still important for understanding where our beliefs about ourselves or the world come from. But the therapeutic work itself is aimed at solving the problem the client is struggling with today, the one that's currently interfering with their life. And what's key in CBT, and actually the main reason I chose to work in this approach, is the opportunity to equip clients with skills they can use not only for the problem they bring to therapy, but in many other areas of life. So during therapy, we develop methods that help clients gain insight into their core beliefs and improve their ability to identify the emotions that come up in response to various situations. So clients learn how to recognize and identify their automatic thoughts, how to connect those thoughts to their behaviors, and finally, how to use techniques developed in therapy to rationally analyze their behavior and ask themselves, is this response appropriate and adaptive, or could I change it so it doesn't lead to negative feelings and suffering? So that's very useful, it's very helpful, and I'm really happy when a client leaves with having the hands-on ability to deal with the problem. And additionally, in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a strong emphasis on the psychoeducational aspect of the sessions. So this means helping clients, for example, learn how to identify early warning signs of disorder. And this is especially important in, for instance, depression or other mood disorders where symptoms can return. And the earlier those signs are recognized, the more effective treatment can be, and the sooner it can be started. Clients who are able to spot the early signs of a drop in mood, who notice that something is changing in their behavior, tend to seek psychiatric help much faster, and that can help them avoid sinking into a deeper depression that would make it almost impossible to function, or for sure it makes it impossible to function at their best. So to sum up, cognitive behavioral therapy, as you can hear, it is quite different from psychodynamic therapy. Well, the focus is placed on different areas, and the source of a client's problem is understood in a different way. So there's always a question if CBT is a better option. Well, from my perspective, as someone who works in this approach, of course I'm going to say yes. From the researcher perspective, CBT offers a way to objectively and measurably assess a client's progress. So we can see whether the client is doing their homework assignments. We can observe in real time how they interpret events in their life. We can hear what they say and whether they're identifying their automatic thoughts. And compared to psychodynamic therapy, which has a more, let's say, narrative and open-ended character, CBT is far more concrete. It's also a form of therapy that demands full engagement from both sides. So the intellectual effort is high for both the client and the therapist. And that being said, not every therapist's personality is perfect fit for CBT. And there will also be clients who aren't looking to pinpoint and solve a specific problem. So some people simply want a reflective space, a catalyst for their emotions, and a way to look at their life from a broader perspective. And for them, CBT probably will not be the first choice. Well, however, the majority of emotional and behavioral problems, as well as more complex disorders and dysfunctions, CBT offers highly effective tools and a clear, structured path forward. So, similarly to psychodynamic therapy, I would say that CBT is a good choice for the vast majority of disorders, including specific phobias, which I told you that psychodynamic therapy will not be the most effective. Well, so thank you for today's episode, and have a nice evening or nice day. And until next time, bye bye.